So okay.
It's a fake commercial for an old 70s compilation rock album called "Effin' on the Blim Blam."
Is that what that's from?
I just sent it to you.
Oh no. Okay, hold on. I got
That's
it.
hilarious.
Oh, I gotta send this to our little chat so we can copy this.
That earned them a follow.
It's an old compilation, so it's not like new or anything like that.
Well, it's like a fake commercial of like 70s. It's like a fake 70s compilation.
Oh, and they took that and went ahead and oh, that's funny. Okay, hold on. I'm finding it. It's in our text thing. Here we go. Hold on, wait. I'm gonna share it from our piece. Oh, this is gonna be good. I'm so glad we're not live. I mean, it's not gonna matter if we were anyway. I'd still do this. But no, I'm not inviting. So did you read the context in which Doug was using it?
That's what I am reading it right now.
Okay. Share screen. We're gonna share that network. Oh, let's see if we can hear it. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
Hey man, is that Blim Blam Robert? Yeah man. Well, turn it up, man. Keep on elfing on the Blim Blam. Keep on elfing on the Blim Blam. Whoa, elfing on the Blim Blam. Whoa, elfing on the Blim Blam. Whoa, elfing on the Blim Blam. All the time. Turn it down, man. Hey, man, you remember the good old days? In these burning cities, fake elections. Well, man, we found this new album called Blim Blam Rock. It's got all those great songs we used to groove to back then. Just listen. Cat's gonna keep on calling.
I wanted you the Blim Blam. Oh my. Elephant on the Blim Blam. Elephant. Elephant. It's so funny. I know this song before I know this song. That's good.
Now I'm not big on placements. Guess I'll lift on down to the Blim Blam races. Oh, I got you.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh man.
Blim Blam Rock's got it all, man. 40 parody songs by 40 fake artists on 4 records, 3 cassettes, or 2 CDs. Here's more. I'm never gonna chat again. Unsavory
That's funny.
Have got no blim blam. No, I'm never gonna chat again. I know you're not the Jew. I should have known better than to blim and blam and waste a chance to call the chance up. So I'm never gonna chat again the way I call them savory Jews.
Wow. Baby, don't Jew me. Oh wow.
Can we in a place with unsavory Jews?
Can we blam? That's funny.
With bass traps and
Effing Nephilim.
Credit card and COD customers call toll free 1-800.
Okay. All right. That's enough of that. That's enough of that.
Oh man.
Okay. All right. That was good. I needed that.
That was
I
funny.
needed that. I needed some effing blim blam. Wow. Okay, so I didn't even know what was going on. My guy sent me this. It was like, yo, your pastor's on one right now. I was like, I'm in California filming 2 music videos. I'm working on a commercial. I'm working on a short film, and then I'm doing a cooking show all in 3 days. And I leave, and all of a sudden, everybody started effing on some Blim Blam. I'm like, what? Where? How did? So I was like, surely Jason knows what happened, and what the heck is effing on some Blim Blam?
Well, my guess from the context is it's his way of, taking some of the unsavory ways that people talk and just summing it up when you tell people to go, take care of themselves. You go
Go
do,
fully emasculate yourself.
go emasculate yourselves. Yeah, but in a just a funny funny way. um because
Is that is that a way of telling people to go F off?
I think so, yeah, but I think it's like
Are they effing on some blim? So what is effing and what is Blim Blam?
well, I think it's a nonsense phrase to communicate without, Doug knows how it's distracted people become if you use the actual language, and so he did that instead, and apparently that was more distracting than
Well,
the
it
actual
won the
argument.
internet. It won the argument. It made me think about was this rhetoric, or was this just creativity and using a word, and then it caught fire? Because the way the internet is now, you don't know what catches fire anymore. You're not in control of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is the thing is, and it's kind of always been like that, right? Like, a band puts together an album and then one of the songs takes off. And sometimes it's on
Right.
purpose and they plan it. Other times it's not. You hear all sorts of stories about bands, putting out an album, and the release for their single, they think this is the one and it doesn't catch on, but then like the third track on the album does, and so then they release that as a single and it goes huge and nobody saw it coming. It's the so there is that has always been the case, which is why in a lot of ways there was a really interesting study done by that where they had pottery students. They gave them a semester and they said, hey, your goal is to create, and they took half of them and said, your goal is to create one perfect pot. And they took another group and the other half, and they said, your goal is to create as many pots as possible. And the people creating as many pots as possible created better pots in the long run than the people that were trying to create one perfect pot. And it's so I think the internet is always that way, that you create a lot, and that's how you find something that catches. Nobody creates something that goes broad on, out the gate.
It's funny. Go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought on that.
Well, so I think, Doug's, I don't know, probably in the 10 to 50 million word range in total output. So, creating at some point you're going to create a phrase that catches on.
I've this is hard for me to say. I think I might have been I might well, it's funny. That's not coming out. I was rethinking some things. I might have been I need some more coffee. It's too early to try and say this. I don't think I was as accurate as I thought I was when it came to posting in social media, because I misunderstood people's appetite and how fast. There's two things that people can hold on to things really, really closely, and then they can digest them really, really fast.
Yeah.
And people's digestion of content is so quick right now that to try and make this goes back to your point about people making the perfect pottery versus people just saying make as much pottery as you can, and the people who made as much pottery as they can end up making better pots. I've been more in the category of people who want to make something that's perfect every time. Yeah. And I think that has been the biggest failure that I've had to deal with over the last 2 years. So when something happens, like when COVID happened, that was a huge growing point for me, but it was also a huge growing point for influence over social media and everything else, because that was like right in my lane. I knew that one clearly. It wasn't hard for me to create content around COVID. It was there. You know, I knew what God's law was. I knew what the standards were, and that hasn't changed. I still understand a lot of that, but the everybody was finally there. The things that we were doing at Cross Politic was always inside of some sort of COVID category. Does that make sense? So, who's in charge? What is the standard? What can't I do? What can I do? Who can tell me that? And where are the lines and the barriers for each sphere to operate? That's just been Cross Politic 101 from day one. And most people didn't find out about that until COVID. Matter of fact, I would say most people laughed at us and thought it was silly because we weren't talking about worship, which we were. We weren't talking about the importance of the church and all that, which we were. But we had a fuller context for the narrative of how humans are to flourish and live and work, and law and politics. We had a larger narrative for human flourishing. Right. And so, everything in our lane became general, became finally everybody was talking about it. Dude, it's really funny. You go back and you listen to podcasts 6 years ago, they weren't having this conversation. Matter of fact, I would say that the social justice movement and the woke crowd and critical race theory shoved everybody into a conversation that evangelicals weren't having in the beginning. They just weren't having these. I'm telling you, 6-7 years ago, you look back on the podcast stream, you do not find Christian political podcasts. There was maybe 3 really. It was Cross Politic. It was what's his name? Al Mohler.
Yeah, Al Mohler.
Yeah, and I think Justin Giboney had just did a podcast at the time too. He had just started one at the time. I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you about, because it's coming back again around Martin Luther King's salvation and if he was a Christian or not. I want to ask you about that. Okay. So anyway, there wasn't a whole lot. So everything kind of came in our lane, an evangelical lane. Every evangelical now has got to have this conversation. So everybody's talking about it. And so making content and producing content in our lane has been what we've done. And now since COVID, everything's kind of eased up a little bit. And so people don't feel the same sort of struggle. And so we don't have the same attraction to some of the audience as probably once did, because now everybody's talking about what we're supposed to do. And nobody's really holding to the original standard that they held to of Romans 13. Everybody's flipped. And so people are trying to figure out now, what is the content to attract this new group of people who are post-COVID. Yeah. Is that 13? 19. Yeah.
That's how long ago it was.
Yeah. That's COVID-19. I was like, is it 13, 19, 15? Of course, I've had not enough coffee this morning, and I was trying to say I was still can't do it. And so, but I've figured out now that the content that you're supposed to be making just needs to be the content that would naturally come from you, and it needs to be a lot more of it. You just need to be making a lot more content, producing a lot more enjoyable, engaging, fun content for people. And then they are going to decide whether or not that's something that they want or not. And you don't have control over that anymore. And it's Jason, this whole thing has flipped for me. And I'm going somewhere with this. But this whole thing has flipped for me, where it used to be, and maybe this is a gatekeeper mentality, but it used to be that an A&R, you know what, A&Rs used to be the people who manage artists inside of a record label and help them develop their talent. And then when they got to a certain point, they would release them to the public and say, this person is ready to be consumed by everybody.
Yeah.
I come from that era where you don't show what you're doing until you've practiced it so much that it's perfect.
Right.
We aren't there anymore. That world does not exist, and you are going to be judged not on how perfect you are, but if you have anything, if you have any skill. They'll judge you, and then they'll let you develop it over time, and they'll keep coming back. I didn't come from that era. I came from an era where but if you're going to come out and say you know how to sing, you better know how to sing.
Yeah,
you better
I think
be
there's
good.
I think there's actually two things going on at once, though, because I think that at the blockbuster level, at the Taylor Swift, I think there still is a top probably 2%, 5% of art is at that level, and then you have probably 50% at that development level where the
50?
authenticity, the honesty, that's where what people connect with, kind of just the humanness of it. And then I think that middle section is the stuff that's failing, the stuff that's trying to be at the top but isn't there yet.
That's all commercial stuff, though.
It is all the commercial stuff that isn't at the highest level, right, is failing still, and that used to be the way it was. And the top 5, it's the top 5% of book sales make up for the 95% of books that they lose money on, right, in publishing. That's in the big 5, that big 5 era. In publishing, there used to be 5 major publishing companies, all centered in New York, and they made up like a 90% of all published books. Well, in that era, the top 5% of books that sold made up for 95% of books that lost money.
But isn't there percentage
in Hollywood?
I'll let you go ahead.
It was the top one. The 1 in 5 movies made money, but the one movie that made money made 5 times the money. That of itself, right?
That's kind of the same thing with Netflix too. Netflix is kind of working that same model.
Although it's more like 1% of everything, 1% of what they make is popular, or it's something like 2% of what they make gets 5% or more of their audience to watch it.
But don't you think it's because our consumption level is so high now that
I think that there's so much art, like there's so much being produced,
right,
that we're easily distracted. I mean, there's a lot of shows that I don't finish anymore, right? I watch 1 episode, 2 episodes, where I used to be kind of a completer. You start it and you finish it, but you don't need to anymore because there's plenty of options.
Well, and that's, I guess, is part of inside of those numbers that I don't think has been accounted for is the fact that the stuff that you're talking about that got printed or got seen, or now think about the stuff that didn't get made during that era. That's not the same setup now. Everything that wants to get made is being made. Every book that wants to get published, for the most part, they can publish it, and Amazon has opened, and there's these new pockets of people who are committing to smaller, unique brands and avoiding some of the commercialized. I think that some of the hate against Taylor Swift isn't so much as just Taylor, it's that she's commercialized.
Yeah.
And all these other pockets are so small that they're like, this is our brand. And they've been able to bite off a new segment of the market that they would have never been able to get before. So you got followers of people on social media who have a fan following of 20,000 people that nobody even knew existed, who are making a living off of them.
Right. Which, by the way, I do have a new book out. Did you see that?
Wait, that was your book?
That was my book. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. This is what you text. This is funny because I was like, "Hey, Jason, what do you want to talk about?"
I forgot, and then that just reminded me.
Leprechaun Wars, a Sun
Leprechaun Wars. Yeah, the first in the series.
I didn't know that was your book. Yeah, if I would have went to the link, I would have seen it says Jason Farley. Who's that guy? Okay, wait. So, Leprechaun Wars, the Sunblood Ring, bro.
Sun's Blood Ring. Yeah.
Where's the? Oh, I forgot the S. Where's the audiobook version of this?
Well, hopefully it comes out soon. That's the next thing
When have
I'm
you
gonna do.
recorded it?
I haven't recorded it yet, but I think I have the setup now to be able to
Well, yeah,
record it, and I've been
people.
right, and I've been researching how to get it onto Audible, right? Because that's
Well,
that's
people.
it's true. I know some people. Yeah, and maybe that's what I need to do is come figure, just come down to Moscow and use your
Yeah. And you know
studio.
what? And figure out how to. I would love to put this in the app. Okay, so what is this book? So I think didn't we shoot something? Was it
Yeah,
related to
so
this?
yeah, because I also tried to get this made as or I have written it as a TV show as well. But this is the novel version of the story, or of the beginning of the story. So the idea being, that it's that since we don't have the what it takes to make a Leprechaun TV show, get it out as a novel, start getting the people connected to the story, and prove that it's good there, and then move it over to a TV show
Wait, when did
eventually.
you even have time to finish this? What is this even about?
It's about a 30-year-old English teacher, junior high English teacher, that accidentally catches a leprechaun and finds herself thrown into a uh, ages old leprechaun war between. So it's a adventure story basically, with the central idea being, um, that you've there it in a lot of ways it's similar to something like Narnia, where they're in and out of between the real world, the this world, and um the other another world, a fantasy world, that functions um basically along covenant lines. That's the idea, is you've got this fantasy world that all functions on strict covenant lines.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
So you've got uh you know kingdoms with inheritances. You've got covenants that have all been signed and ratified for each people group. So it's kind of the idea is, because we've talked about this before, that you all that so much of our difficulty in understanding covenant has to do with our imagination being so drowned in materialism. um Whereas, so covenants seem like and feel like, and I've seen modernistic writers try to describe covenants and say, well, it works like magic. um it's a magical system. And in a materialistic context, that actually is a closer description
And
to
that's
how
why
covenants work.
we can't understand Melchizedek.
Right, right, yeah. So but it doesn't work like magic, because magic is an impersonal force that can be controlled, and God is not an impersonal force that can be controlled.
Mm.
But he does set up and bind. He binds the world according to certain um he- expectations, and
With
people have particular responsibilities. There are expectations that go with those responsibilities, and then there are promises that he makes, and then and it's a way that he promises to act, right? So he binds himself by
yeah,
himself, because there's
yeah.
nothing greater that he can swear by, we're told. He binds himself by himself, uh to act a particular way towards us, right? He binds himself to us as our God. And so
Can
um
so I
so I
want you to
tried
I,
to write a world that existed on covenant principles, and then this English teacher keeps getting pulled into it, and has to learn it, and that sort of thing.
okay,
Her and
so
her brothers.
I want to come back to this, but I think this might be a good place to talk about this. Um, well, I was in Minneapolis with my mom and stepdad, and um, she's been going through some health issues. and I went there to kind of comfort her, and we were having some Bible studies, and oh man, my heart is so heavy around this. But there is a deep, deep yearning inside of the area that I grew up in for biblical knowledge. And one of the things that I've noticed is that their ability to apply it quickly is there, but they don't have teachers to teach them about the word of God like they need. And this has been a huge thing, I think, inside of the charismatic movement for sure. And it hurts because there's a lot of false teachers or ignorant teachers. I think you have it's hard to tell the difference between the two of them, because you got some guys who just love the Lord, but are just ignorant as all get out.
Yeah.
And you got some guys who are just charlatans. And these guys can look exactly the same depending on what moment you find them, right? And so there's a huge gap of hunger for theological teaching there. And I found that as I was pouring into my mom and into her husband, that they just opened up a lot, and they began to ask so many questions. And they were surprised at how much I knew. And I was surprised that they were surprised that I knew so much. I was like, I really don't feel like I know hardly anything. I feel so small and insignificant. I feel like I'm striving to know more, but they were just drinking it up. And my mom's husband asked, "Hey, so explain to me why we can't understand Melchizedek." And I started working through that with him, explaining it. And I was like, I am going to take 2 months to try to explain this to him. So I called you on the phone, and graciously you picked up the phone. And in like 10 minutes, you broke down Melchizedek, probably better than I've ever heard you do it before. Maybe the problem was you have too much time here on Knox Unplugged to do it. But what you did with Melchizedek was you took the magic out of it, and you made covenantalism something that was tangible, so that it was something that you can operate on immediately. And it was like a Rubik's Cube. I was watching them as you were talking, and it was like a Rubik's Cube was turning in their head, and everything fit into place. And all of a sudden, kind of the charismania stuff wasn't, it was irrelevant. There was something that was tangible. It was something that was structured from beginning to end, and it started making sense of so much for them, of how, and the importance of who Jesus was. And so here, before you go on to talk more about this, because I think you're hitting it in your book, and I want to ask you if you wrote your book for this reason, because it seems like you did. We don't understand covenant. We don't understand
Right.
covenant. We don't have a good understanding of it at all. And the way that theologians talk about it almost seems sometimes inaccessible, or it's not practical in it. And I was going to go, so as part of what I was going to talk about later, it was as I was talking about the new way of social media is kind of the way that we understand covenant now. We still have an Old Testament idea and understanding of it. So then we act that way in a new world, and it doesn't work for us as evangelicals.
Right.
And I'll talk about that later, but I want you real quick just to break down, if you can, just the whole understanding of Melchizedek and the importance of it, because I think that ties into your book and the way that we need to be operating with a true understanding of covenant theology. And I think that has to do with signs and symbols and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, so I think it is. I think it's significant that that within the charismatic sphere of things, where put it this way, most people, when they say we need to argue against the hyper charismatic, the problems within it, they think that what they need is sort of old-fashioned cessationism or something like that, or newfangled cessationism, which is what
I
they
love
get
what you're
most
about
of
to
the
do.
time. Yeah.
I love what you're about to do. Go ahead, preach it, man. Preach it.
But that really isn't usually where the issue is, because because you're offering them a materialistic version of the faith in place of a supernatural version in most modern cessationist understandings. But it's because of they're both individualistic. right? They're both, because they're both individualistic. If the options are a supernatural individualistic version of Christianity, or a non-supernatural
Oh,
individualistic
right. Yeah. I'm going
version, right?
supernatural. Yeah,
Yeah,
all the
you're going
time.
supernatural, right? Then if those are the options, but there is another issue
Oh,
that I think really needs to be addressed, that puts that issue on the back burner um, in the conversation, but it eventually it brings it back up, I think,
okay.
in a
Hold on.
more
Hold on.
helpful context.
Your setup
So
is gonna make me put my bib on. Come on, man. Like I'm about to eat up in this joker. All right.
Right.
My
So
bib's on. Feed me.
because what the charismatics understand is that God has promised, he has promised to be with them and to act on their behalf in the moment, in the present, right?
And
And
yeah,
what
real time and space right now.
time and space right now. But
Yeah.
the question is, then the question though is, what are the promises? What are the promises? And um the the and that's where you have to dig in, I think, to Adam and to Abraham, right, to say what are the promises. And then the but then you say, well, but how do we get from Adam, how do we get from Abraham, from Noah, right, to us? How do those promises become our promises? Because that's what the New Testament teaches, right? That the promises to Abraham, we by faith are children of Abraham. Well, what does that mean? How and how why does being a child of Abraham become something that means the promises given to Abraham are promises to us now? Right. And that's an inheritance question. Right. So this is the reason that communists want to say that when a person dies, their children can't inherit their wealth, is because they need a world where there's a distinct, sharp, anti-covenantal uh,
Mm.
uh, break between parent and child, right? If the child is going to be the property of the state, property is not the right word because they don't believe in property, but it would be a cog in the machine of the state, right? Then you actually have to have a distinct and a separation between the generations, or they believe that there's a distinct separation, right? So that there can't be a covenantal connection. And inheritance is at the heart of a covenantal connection, right? And
Inheritance
so
is. Yeah,
yeah,
because you're saying yeah, I got it.
so when it comes to when it comes to the question of Melchizedek, it's deeply centrally a question of inheritance rights, right? So Melchizedek is in Psalm 110, which is the psalm when David, it's the psalm that's written and sung for David's installation at the throne of Jerusalem. All right, so the throne of Jerusalem, David sits down on the throne at Jerusalem. He's just become the king of Israel, so all 12 tribes. So he was the prince of Judah. Judah was the legal firstborn of Abraham, and he's the prince of Judah. But then he ends up being voted or installed or made into the king over all of the tribes. So he's the king of all the tribes. The tribes each retain their prince, who's the firstborn of the patriarch of their tribe, right? So Judah was the patriarch of the tribe of Judah. You've got Benjamin as the patriarch of the tribe of Benjamin. Each of those firstborn descendants is the prince of that tribe. But David becomes king of all the tribes, and he moves into Jerusalem, which used to be Salem, to make that the capital city of the nation of Israel, and he sits down on the throne. Well, we know the city of Salem already had a king, and we know that king first shows up in Abraham's day. Abraham is the he's the patriarch, the first patriarch of the Hebrew people that God has called and set aside and given promises to. Well, his nephew, who's set to inherit everything before Isaac is born, right? Before Isaac is born, Abraham doesn't have as anyone to inherit, and so he brings Lot with him, because Lot would be his nephew who would be legally set to inherit all of his wealth, right? If he dies without an heir. And so Lot comes with him. Lot is captured by the king of Sodom, and Abraham takes his personal army that he funds himself with his wealth, because he is a nation wandering, right? He's got an army, and so he goes and he wins back Lot, and he refuses to take anything from Sodom and Gomorrah, because he says, I don't want anyone to ever say Sodom and Gomorrah are the ones that made me rich. It's only the Lord that's ever made me rich. And so he takes Lot's things back and he gives them to him, and then he goes to tithe to the Lord, and he goes to the priest of the Most High God that's there in the area, which is Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek also is the king of the city of Salem, right? He's a priest king. So, and as a priest king to the Most High God, he's a descendant of Noah in the Noahic covenant. He's a priest after the Most High God, and Abraham tithes to him. And so the book of Hebrews makes a big deal out of that, because Aaron and the priesthood of the Levites is all still in Abraham covenantally, right? So covenantally,
oh my goodness,
Levitical priesthood is also tithing, and you only tithe to the greater. You don't tithe to the lesser. So
time out.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. No, I'll save it. I had a Baptist question, but keep going.
Okay, so you have this tithing that the Levitical priesthood does to the greater priesthood, so you know that it's the greater priesthood. Well, then Melchizedek goes back to Salem and sits on his throne as the priest king of Salem. Well, when David goes to establish his kingship and his throne, he goes to Salem and conquers it and renames it Jerusalem, the peace of God, right? God's peace. And he sits on that throne, and then the throne of Melchizedek is knit together or combined with the throne of Israel.
Now, you talked about this before and said that when a conquering king would come and he would conquer the kingdom, they would knit together both robes. They would
knit together both robes. They would take both crowns and put them together, or sometimes they would have the name of the crown, the name of the king on a that they would wear on a chain around their neck. They would put those two things together, right? The titles. And so you would have this, the titles would then be combined. And so this is why you end up with David doing priestly things, even though the king isn't allowed to be a Levitical priest. He still wears a priest's robe for different things, including when he dances before the Lord, he's wearing the priest's garment. So you've got some so he gets to do some priestly things.
And you were talking about this. Sorry, just interrupt quickly. You were saying that in the Abrahamic line, kings couldn't be priests; they were separated. Right.
Yeah, they're separated by the law. I mean, they're legally separated. So the patriarchs do some priestly things as well, but then in the law ends up separating them in Moses's day, right? So Moses, God says priests and kings are separate jurisdictions, and you can't have a priest who is also a king, and you can't have a king who's also a priest. But then David recombines the priesthood of Noah with the throne of David by by sitting on the throne of Melchizedek and combining them. And so then, and Psalm 110 confirms it. Today you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek is said about David, right? Or a priest forever, meaning that the throne of David is now the throne of a priest king, right? And this is what Hebrews is talking about when it brings up Melchizedek. So now, Solomon, who is the only son left of David with an inheritance, inherits the title of Melchizedekian priest, inherits the Melchizedekian priesthood as well as the kingship because he inherits the throne. And then the firstborn of the firstborn of the firstborn is you go all the way down to Joseph. And Joseph is the legal inheritor of the throne of David and the priesthood of Melchizedek. And so when he marries Mary and Jesus becomes his firstborn son legally, then Jesus becomes the inheritor of the throne rights of David, which also are the throne rights of Melchizedek. Jesus is also the firstborn of the firstborn back to Noah, which makes him the firstborn of the firstborn back to Adam. So he also inherits the Noahic. He's the firstborn of Abraham, and as well as the firstborn of David, right? So he inherits all of God's promises as the seed of Adam, Noah, Abraham, David, the seed of Israel as well. So that makes him the covenantal head of every jurisdiction. So he can die for the world because he's the covenant head of every jurisdiction in the world, right? Every that God established. So this is, and then it says,
wait, you got to work on that. You can't just say that like that. Covenantal head of every jurisdiction. What jurisdictions are you particularly thinking about? And so he's inherited the Adamic line.
So the Adam, who is the first king of the world, the first representative of the world, which I think is the primary meaning of king, is covenant head, right? Is the representative of a people. So we tend to think in terms of who has the coercive power because that's what it becomes after the fall. But before the fall, it was a representative position. Figurehead in the good sense, right? He's the figure that is the head of the nation. And then he is he inherits the priesthood of mankind, right? Through so Noah, was established he as the priest of mankind, and Melchizedek is the representative of that. And then so you've got him, he's both the priest and the king, but then Abraham is the sort of the new humanity that is established out of and brought down to Israel, and he's made into the new humanity. And so when Matthew opens calling him the son of Abraham, that's really important because God has said that the son of Abraham is the seed that I'm going to renew the world by, which is the promise that was given to Eve about her seed as well, right? So you've got the inheritance. The inheritance is this promise, is this seed promise that God is going to renew the world through your descendant, and that is given to Eve, and then it's focused in on, it's restated to Noah in a general sense, but then it's focused in on Abraham, and then that Abrahamic promise, right, that all of the 12 tribes inherit, is then focused in on Judah at the end of Genesis, and then it's focused in on David as even though he's the seventh son, he ends up becoming the legal inheritor, right? It was supposed to be, well, yeah. So so you've got, because he's got older siblings that would have legally been the inheritor, but then God says, no, I want him to become the firstborn, right? And so you've got all these firstborn inheritance laws. So for that, firstborn gets a double portion of the inheritance. In the book of Deuteronomy, you've got
Right.
lots of talk about firstborn inheritance. That's why it's when God keeps choosing the secondborn to be the firstborn,
It's
it's
kind
a
of
really big deal, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because he's the one that set up the firstborn inheritance laws, and then he's like, and I want the secondborn to become the firstborn, right? I'm shifting that this is not uh something that's set in stone. This is a historical reality that's going to work its
Or,
way
or,
out.
or covenantalism isn't the way that y'all think it is, right? It is
Right.
right, right. I think that's one thing too. Is like part of some of the there is we can systematize something that is that God has set up, and it's like, but that's not what God has said, right? Like there is so we can mark the firstborn with the scarlet thread,
Right.
right? And God's like, yeah, not that one. That this is the
Right.
firstborn, right? And I
Right.
think,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Well, and I think what's really amazing about it is when God establishes the covenant with Abraham, he tells us very clearly, where with no in no uncertain terms, that the way that covenants are kept is by faith, right, and not by law, right, by trust,
mm-hmm,
by faith,
mm-hmm,
right, by believing what God says and trusting him. And so it's not just an exchange, an economic exchange sort of thing. It's a personal trust that is how you keep faith, or it's how you keep covenant. And so you have uh, this establishing that God keeps doing, and where he focuses now the seed promise down to David, right? It says David is this. So it's like a keep your eye on the ball type of situation, right? He keeps saying there's this general seed promise that one of the children of Eve is going to be the seed, right? And then he keeps focusing it down, and this is why they keep genealogies as an act of faith in the Old Testament, because it's a seed promise that they've got. It's a genealogical promise, right? So they keep genealogies. Well, you finally get down to Jesus, and the genealogies have been kept. The problem is you've got a usurper sitting on the throne. You've got a Roman sitting on the throne up there. What's really interesting is Cyrus is said to be he's the imperial power, but he's also put on David's throne by God, right? So then the imperial power also is this kind of shadow thing that's going on. The King of Kings, Cyrus, um, God says, keep an eye on that throne as well, because that one is also the one I'm after. And then you can track that throne from Cyrus down to the Caesar. So the Caesar is also a throne that God says he's established, and that throne is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and it's going to be vacated and replaced by his Messiah as well. And the moment that it is vacated, Colossians tells us, is at the cross, because the Roman Psalm 2 tells us that the world's authorities gather together. Well, the world's authorities are the Roman Empire, right? That's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, is the Roman Empire before the cross. And then the authorities from David's throne, right? Literally, Jesus is sent around to visit with these authorities. He visits Pilate, right? He goes up to the throne of David, and Herod is sitting on the throne of David. He's sent to Herod, and Herod says, "Yep, let's." I'm judging him too, and then the Roman Empire is the one, and then they ask the temple authorities, what should we do? Right? The temple authorities said, give us Barabbas. Right? So each of the authorities then takes their turn condemning Jesus.
Okay, so is it fair to say that we have the maybe I'm thinking about, I don't know what to call it, but we have the state,
Yeah, so
and you have
the Roman,
the church,
you have the state, you have the church,
and the populace, the people, the family.
you have the well, you have the people, the would be kind of the synagogue system would be God's establishment of the people, but you also have an elder system, right? So
Yeah.
that's been there since Exodus. In Exodus, you see that the people are represented by a series of elders. So you have the city. The city also judges him. The city of Jerusalem judges him, which is why he's crucified outside the city. He has to be sent out of the city for his crucifixion because he's been exiled from Jerusalem by their judgment. So you have all of these different judgments, governments that each pronounce judgment, which is what Psalm 2 tells us. Including, the usurper on David's throne, the representative of Cyrus's imperial throne, which is Pilate. So because that throne, Daniel tells us how to keep an eye on that throne, right? So that we know what to look for, and that throne is going to that empire is going to attempt to step on the Messiah when he comes, but it's the empire that's going to be destroyed by it, and the empire will then grow, right? So when Jesus shows up at the beginning of Revelation as the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who holds the seven seven stars in his right hand, that's all that's the imperial throne Jesus has taken to himself. So Colossians is where it tells us they thought that they were parading Jesus through the streets, but really he was stripping them of their authority, right? He was actually parading all of the authorities of the world through the streets by allowing himself to be crucified when he could call on legions of angels to come to his defense. He allows himself to be crucified, which reveals to the world, right? Jesus's nakedness makes naked the power structures of the world. He strips the power structures of the world of all of their robes, and then he is resurrected into their robes, right? So all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus at the resurrection.
Right? It's so funny when you say that. I don't know why that hit different. Usually when I think about that, all authority in heaven and earth, was that Matthew 28?
Yeah.
And I usually hear that, and I don't know why. And and I'm post-millennial Presbyterian. I think so spiritually about that instead of legally.
Right.
Right. And so that's a legal proclamation about the world, not just, and because of the cosmology and the whole setup in my head, I am thinking of the world in a completely different type of way, but that is a legal proclamation which has spiritual implications.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, because I think we always think of power in terms of coercion because of our Machiavellian our nihilistic understanding of creation, of reality, right? So the world is in a particular shape, society is in a particular shape, everything is in a particular shape because there's a coercive power holding it that way, right?
But that's not the case.
That's not the case. Yeah, that's not the case at all. But that is the way that that's the way the ancients outside of Christianity thought about it. Except for there were a handful of philosophers that thought differently. This is why people said, well, Plato must have read the Bible, because that he believed that there was a different reality. Now, I think that he was wrong about the setup, but he believed that there was a a reality outside of coercive power giving the world its shape, that there was a positive shaping of the world, not a nihilistic shaping of the world. And so all of the Christian philosophers were like, well, that's something we agree with Plato on, and there aren't other ancient philosophers saying that at the time. So he must have read the Bible, which we know was in the Library of Athens. You know, so it's technically possible that he would have read the Old Testament. But we don't know if he did or not. But they were making the argument because he was not nihilistic in a coercive power sense of the shaping of reality. So I get why Neoplatonism was so tempting and is so tempting, or it seems like a legitimate option, because in a nihilistic world, I mean, and you see this all the time, like when people are like, well, is Joe Rogan a conservative? You say, well, no, not really. But does he sometimes have like common sense? Like, absolutely. And you grip onto him when under attack from everything else in the world, right? Jordan Peterson, the same thing.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, we grab onto him because we say he's speaking sense. There must be some sort of Christian influence underneath,
yeah,
right? And I think with those two guys, there is, obviously, and it's becoming more and more. They're becoming more and more aware of the Christian influence on them. So, but this understanding of the world that we are so steeped in metaphysical nihilism, which you know, I think I would say that the cultural expression of that metaphysical nihilism is socialism.
Okay.
And we're so steeped in it that you have that you really do have people saying it's not a question of if this is a power game, it's only a question of which
person holds the power.
Which person has the power, which group has the power.
So this is something that I'm beginning to spend a lot more time thinking about, because I was writing down as you were talking, if the world is covenantal, what does that mean? Did you get through all the Melchizedek stuff? Because I think you did. I think you made it through.
I think I did, yeah.
But there's an implication of what you're saying, which is that it's if Jesus didn't have the covenantal realities, the legal covenantal realities, then we wouldn't have a changed world nor the salvation in which we need in order to be able to say we're justified. We don't have any grounds to be justified if Jesus wasn't covenantally who he was, right?
Right.
He was a prophet.
Go ahead. And all of the accusations that God is a child abuser would actually make sense, right? If he took just a random dude and that random dude, he threw all the sins of the world onto him, but there wasn't a deep covenantal responsibility for the world that Jesus had, then it wouldn't make it. I mean, the substitutionary atonement would make no sense. It would be just a random act of injustice that God required, right? It would be the equivalent of a pagan sacrifice. But it's not, because Jesus had the covenantal authority, the covenantal right to rights for the world, and he chose to lay himself down on behalf of his people whom he represented.
This is something that you said to my mom and to my pops that was so good. You was like, because he had the rights of a king, he could actually be responsible for the people and offer himself up. And because he was a priest, he could present himself as a, and I can't remember how you said it, but you took prophet, priest, and king and all the legal rights that he had, no one else could do what he did.
Right.
Right.
Because
No
he
one
had
else.
because he had the legal rights as a priest, he could make the sacrifice. Because he has the legal rights of a king, he could be the sacrifice.
Mm.
Right. And so he could offer himself as the sacrifice on the cross because he was the priest after the order of Melchizedek, and because he was the king after the order of David and Adam. Right. He
How
was
did
the new Adam.
how does his prophetic ministry play into this, into the
So
legality of it?
yeah, so the so prophet is interesting because you don't inherit being a prophet, right? Prophet is the
You're anointed as one, right?
you're anointed as a prophet, right? You're put aside by God as a prophet. But what a prophet does is a prophet speaks to God on behalf of the people. So all of the parts of Jesus being our intercessor, right? He continues to intercede for us, right? That's his prophetic ministry. He received his prophetic ministry in his baptism, right? So in his and we know that because he upon his baptism he was Jonah'd. This right, he became the he was baptized, and then he goes out into the wilderness and becomes a living example of what God is doing to Israel in the moment, right? So he goes out into the wilderness. He and he's tempted in the three ways that Israel was tempted in while they were wandering in the wilderness, which happened to also be the ways that Adam was tempted when he was. It's the same temptations, but without the supports, right? So he's surrounded by Adam's surrounded by tame animals. He's surrounded by
Wild beasts.
wild beasts. Adam is in the garden,
Wow.
the wilderness. Adam is tempted to take what to not trust God not take God at his word, but take the food. Jesus is tempted by his hunger. Adam is we're told that they saw that it was good for that it was beautiful, that it was good for food, right? And Jesus is tempted in the same sort of way, right? So Jesus is, as a prophet, he is enacting the prophecy, right? He's living, his life is the prophecy, just like Jonah. If God's people don't turn, they're going to be kicked out of the land. Jonah is thrown into the sea, right? Out of the land into the sea. They're going to be swallowed up by the nation, a nation of the earth. In fact, they're going to be swallowed up by Assyria, because Jonah is contemporaries with Isaiah. You're going to be swallowed up by Assyria. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria, right? So he's sent to Nineveh. But they also, their exile is going to be the salvation of Assyria, right? Nineveh ends up converting, and it becomes a soft place to land for them. They're ready, and we know from Obadiah that there was a conversion and then a falling away. So, right? So we have Jonah. His life, because he won't repent, because he doesn't listen to God and do what he's told, he is exiled from the land, swallowed up by a sea monster, and then when he repents, he's finally vomited back onto the land, right? Well, that is that's the prophecy, right? The prophecy is, if you repent, then you won't be then you won't be kicked out of the land and swallowed by a sea monster.
It's Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah, when you don't repent, when you don't ask God's for forgiveness, stop sinning, stop worshiping idols, then you will be thrown into the sea and swallowed by a sea monster, right? Thrown out of the land into the sea, swallowed by a sea monster. And then when you're in the belly of that beast, you will come to your senses, you will repent, and you will be vomited back onto the land. Where that's exactly what happens, right, to Israel. So the prophecy was true. Well, Jesus's prophecy, his first prophecy is to go out into the land, face the temptations, and defeat the devil, right? That's what God is here to do. And if you go with Jesus, it's going to feel like going into exile from the land,
Mm.
right? If following him is going to look at like you're getting kicked out of the people of God, but in fact, it's going to be the defeat of the devil, as well as um, the joining of the true Israel who resists the temptations, right? And
This
so
is like
all of the
Colossians
promises,
again. This
yeah,
is
it
like,
is,
yeah.
it is. So it's and so Jesus's life is the life of a prophet from his baptism on, right? So but the other thing that prophets do is they speak into existence a new world, and so it's just like in
Magic.
Jesus, Jesus is the one who spoke the world into existence in the first place.
Mm.
His word is going to turn out to be the redemption of the world, or the building of a new world. He's going to speak into existence the new world, the new covenant, the new the new covenant is going to be made from out of his uh, words, right? Or it was going to be his word is going to bring into existence, is going to recreate the world, create a new world. So so his prophetic ministry is a is a combination of his life, right? And then his word as a recreative force in the world. So his word breaks down the old world. Right? His word. So when he goes into the the temple 2 times, one at the beginning of his ministry, one at the end of his ministry, and he cleanses it, he is acting as a prophet who's enacting the
Leviticus rituals, right?
Leviticus rituals for the house,
Or should I
right? The
say
house,
the Levitical law, actually,
the
not just
Levitical
original.
law, yeah. But he's prophetically enacting it, right? What a Levitical priest was supposed to do when a house has leprosy is go in and cleanse it, and then when they come back, if it has grown again, if the house leprosy has grown again, then they're supposed to take the house down brick by brick and spread it out and not use those bricks anymore. So Jesus goes in, he cleanses the temple, and then he comes back 3 years later and goes up to the temple again, finds the same leprosy there, cleanses it again, and he runs out. It says the sellers of doves. The way that you would pronounce a house clean from leprosy is through a sacrifice of doves in the house. But he runs the sellers of doves out of the house, and then he comes back down and he says, "Not one stone will be left upon another." Right? He declares prophetically that he is now going to knock the house down and spread it out, and that those stones are not going to be used as a building material anymore. And because those bricks were covered in gold, they actually literally take it down a stone at a time and melt the gold off, so not one stone is left upon another. Because they don't just sort of knock it down; they actually dismantle it brick by brick. General Titus has it dismantled brick by brick. The way that, just as Jesus's prophetic word promised it would, but his prophetic word brings into reality the new world, right? It's his prophetic word has power because he's been set aside by God by means of Elijah. He becomes the Elisha in the situation, right? Elijah is John the Baptist is the new Elijah. His follower is the prophet that follows on the heels of Elijah is Elisha. And so Jesus becomes the new Elisha for the situation, speaking into existence this new world through his prophetic word, which turns out to be God's word, which turns out to be the word that created the world in the first place. So it's the perfect word. He's the perfect prophet to come and recreate the new world.
This is also,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm tempted not to speak because I don't know what else goodness you're going to say next, but I just wanted to say that you have Elijah, then Elisha, but you also have Moses, and then you have Joshua. So you have conquering time as well because of that prophetic word.
Yeah, but that's exactly what Hebrews says, right? Because Jesus is the Greek term for Joshua, and so when it starts talking about the new Joshua has come, that's exactly what he's talking about. So Jesus, he was the new Moses before he died and rose again, but he was raised as the new Joshua. Um, and Hebrews tells us that he, as the new Joshua, is here to now, um, take the world instead of the land. And then it says, and he's got a sword sharper than any two-edged sword that's able to divide soul from spirit. We usually think that is a sword that we point at ourselves in conviction, but he's been talking about Joshua's conquering. And then he says the sword of the spirit is Joshua's sword, right? Or in that, so he begins talking about the sword of the spirit. That's a conquering sword. Now it's not conquering through violence, right? Because in Revelation we know that the sword comes out of the mouth of the body of Christ, right? It's not in the hands of the body of Christ. The sword of the spirit comes out of the mouth of the body of Christ. So we preach the conquering of the world, right? We conquer the world by means of preaching. The body of Christ doesn't hold a sword; it preaches a sword.
Faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God. That's
exactly right. So it's a converting that is at the level of spirit and soul and mind, right? It's an inside out conversion conquering, not a conquering by the sword held in the hand. But it is a an evangelistic converting religion. Everything gets converted because all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Christ, and so we go out taking everything captive by means of word and sacrament.
Two things. I don't know how you can remain Baptist after hearing that.
Well,
and I don't know how you could remain anything but post-millennial after hearing that. Because
yes, at least optimistic in your eschatology, right?
At least optimistic in your eschatology. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, sure. If you want to be kind about it, you're being gentle. I don't know how you can maintain if all authority, I mean, if the legality of the situation truly is what it is, you don't have any other options. So then, and nor do you have any authority. If that's not true, you don't have any authority to share the gospel, which is the power of God unto salvation, which is the sword of Joshua going forth and conquer. Your whole ability to be able to share the gospel because of the legality of Christ actually doing and being who he is. Right. And if that's not true, then it's not, you can't separate those out and be like, well, you can share the gospel, but Christ can't be king. You only can share the gospel because he is the rightful heir, the king, the prophet, he's all of it. And he's destroyed the old world, and this new world he's brought into place is being developed and rebuilt as we're moving. So the new garden is here. The new reality is here. The new Adam is here, and his kingdom is being built over the rubble of the last one.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't understand any other options here.
Well, it's being built out of the rubble of the last one.
Right? Well, the last one has been destroyed.
It's been destroyed, and he keeps picking up stones and washing them off in baptism, and then using them to build his.
Come on now,
right? Like he's
come
out
on now.
And I think what's amazing is,
and this, I know you're gonna go here, but covenantal realities of what you just explained to me only can so Jason, I know you were gonna say something else, but I gotta go here. How is it that we still live in an old world, old concept? because with this information, this is revolutionary to, I think, even modern evangelicalism to
I
think
think
like
so.
this.
I mean, I think this is the so I think this is why Paul says, "Hey, we agree on this stuff. Don't make a big deal out of new moons and Sabbaths and feast days. Don't make a big deal out of
Christmas.
food laws, what those sorts of things. Like he's it's so long as we agree on this stuff, and then let's work out the details of the calendar, as we go. Because the calendar is a memorialization of the new world, and the new world, the new reality, the new authority structures of the world will work itself into everything. But if you preach it, right? So don't split over these things that are externalizations of this reality, right? The calendar. But what we've done is we've said, let's stop externalizing, right? Let's stop memorializing. Let's because we have stopped believing that Jesus is the potentate of time, that he's the authority over all things, that he's his king of history, right? He'll be the king at some point in the future, but in the meantime, the devil's got this spot. What but that understanding puts us in a defensive posture.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so I think it's that, and
but
you see this.
The gospel cannot be and is not in any way a defensive posture. It is not.
Right. No, I know.
Gospel, that's what I don't understand. It's like when you are going. I'm sorry. I'm getting so excited here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. One of my favorite stories is the Alaskan missionary, or the Presbyterian missionary to the Inuits up in Alaska, who was sent up there. He gets to the Inuits and they say, "Oh, I'm so," to a group of Inuits up in northern Alaska. It says, "We're so glad to have you. Can we would like to tell you about Jesus." And he says, "No, I'm here to tell you about Jesus." And they've already been converted coming from the other direction, right?
That's lovely.
Because the gospel went in both directions, right? And so he gets there, and they expect this white guy to not know Jesus because they don't know who he is or where he's from, but they try to evangelize him when he has been sent to evangelize them, right? So you think the gospel has been has been an offensive force for the church, and even when it runs into a world that is offended by it to the point that it tries to kill them, they have continued to say, well, we're not going to get defensive, right? That we don't respond in kind to, we continue to preach the gospel, and offer, invite people to the table by means of baptism and believing in the Lord Jesus Christ, even when they're arresting us and trying to kill us, right? And it's been this converting, turning enemies into friends for thousands of years, in a way that nothing else has ever done. You've never seen anything like the gospel in the history of the world. So, I mean,
what a statement. You've never seen anything like the gospel in the history of the world. Like, just let that, like, and the only reason that can be true is because the old world has passed away.
Right. The old world is gone. And so all of the every rivalry and warfare and death manipulation, manipulation by the fear of death, every single thing that controlled and defined the ancient world, the old world, the previous world, every single one is gone. It doesn't
Jason,
work anymore.
see,
Right?
that's what I was
And
gonna
all
say.
we have to
Yeah.
do is step into it, right? It's to step into the situation without without the fear of death, and preach the good news that Paul preached. Jesus is risen from the dead, right?
And so is it whatever happened when 70 AD, 80, 70,
yeah,
God just shut it off. It's just got like the powers don't work anymore. You know, it's almost, and in one sense you can say you have all these people who now are living in this new world saying, wait, what happened? Our gods don't have any power anymore.
right. Well, in the book of Hebrews says it happened at the incarnation, right? At the
Oh, right.
yeah, by taking on flesh like ours in every way, body and soul. He became like us in every way, but without sin. He has freed those who were all their lifetime subject to bondage of the bondage of the devil by the fear of death. Right. So it's at the incarnation
that it really took place.
That it really took place. Now there's an overlap of the new world and the old world.
Sure.
But the incarnation, God sneaks in the back door by means of his son Jesus, where he in Bethlehem, just like he said he would, but the devil still missed it, right? Just like he said he would. He was born in a manger and put into a feeding trough to become the bread of heaven, for the whole world. So from the beginning, it was always that was the plan. But then there's some overlap. So the old world and the new world exist side by side, until it's really a series of things, because it's the incarnation, it's Jesus's baptism, it's his death, it's his resurrection, it's his ascension, and then it's the ending of the sacrificial system. That was the belly button of the old humanity. Was the Holy of Holies.
Okay, so I've been trying to keep our sessions down a little lower, but I just have to go into this now. So there is a mentality inside of, I guess the question is, what does it mean then to live, and how do you live in the new world?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that we have, for whatever reason, I feel like we're in a time kind of Judges, and after the time of that Joshua is conquered, and Moses, the Song of Moses, has told his people what's going to happen. Like, God, you're going to be blessed. You're going to the land. Moses doesn't go in, but he's telling them. He writes a song. Listen, you are going to forget. Don't forget, but you're going to forget. Here goes this song to remind you what to do when you're in the belly of the beast again, right? Like this is what you do, right? And then Joshua comes and conquers, and he's like, listen, this is what you need to do. You're going to forget. Don't forget, but you're going to forget. And then by the time you get done with Judges, you got Judges, which you've called decreation, a book. And you have this kind of people who are trying to figure out how they're supposed to live in this conquered land. And they forgot. And I feel like we're kind of in that time again where we are in this cursed moment because we aren't living in the realities of the covenant of what God has done. And so because of that, and some of us who are kind of on the outside are living in kind of an old covenant type mindset instead of as if there's really boogeymen out there. And it's like, but they've all been conquered. They've all been defeated. And your biggest problem really is your lack of faith to trust the Lord and to operate in that reality. And so we have unfortunately used our offensive weapon like a defensive tool and not acknowledge the lordship of Christ in the world, the real legal king, priest, prophet, all authority been given to him, and we're acting like we're in a defensive posture when really we should be advancing. And so everything we do is always defensive because I don't think we have an understanding of covenant realities. So, so living in a non-covenantal reality, living in even a dispensational idea, all this stuff is broken because of the lack of understanding of a covenant. And so we're wondering like, well, why aren't we advancing? Why, if this is so good, how come we're not taking more ground? And it's like, you guys are sitting in America.
Right.
You know, and it's like living in the land that Joshua's conquered and trying to figure out, did we win? Are we busy? It's because of you've forgotten God. So I guess one question, like, how do you live in a new covenant? How do you live in the realities of the legality of what Christ has done? You know?
I think well, what we're told is that the new covenant functions on the same principles that every covenant has functioned. And so we look at Abraham, our father, and we see that he and his people, they conquered the land by faith, right? So it starts the same place Abraham started which is God gave him his promises. He believed the promises and it was counted to him as righteousness. So the question then becomes, what is the promise? What is it that we look at that God promises to do, and how do we then bring that future promise into the present by faith? Because that's what Abraham spent his life doing. He was promised seed, he was promised land, and he was promised that his seed would be kings, right? That his seed would rule. So he looked forward to that, and then by faith brought that promise into the present by living according to it. So the promise that we have is that Jesus is going to return and put all things right. He's going to bring that in Christ, justice and mercy will kiss, and he's going to put all things right, and that he will be, when he returns, that the second coming, that at his return he's going to return. He's going to raise the dead, over the last enemy will be defeated, which is death, and all things will be put right. Perfect justice will be done. And so what we do is we look to that time that God is bringing about, and by faith we bring that into the present, right? So that we bring the restoration of all things into the present, with whatever thing God has put into us, right? So it put before us. So it starts with kids, right? He's promised to be a God to our children, and so by faith we raise our kids by faith and not by works. We raise our kids by faith and not by fear, because
which means you baptize them.
I believe that is the case. Yeah, that because their inheritance, that they have an inheritance.
They have an inheritance. That's right. I mean, that's what I mean earlier. Like, if we function in our baptistic structure and we bring that into Abraham, there would be no inheritance for his future for him, right? Right. But you see what I'm saying?
And I do, and I understand. I'm coming to understand that what a Baptist says is that this is one of the things that's not inherited. But my thought or my response to that is that it's, well, okay. So what a socialist says is that all money is gained by coercion, because there's a limited amount of resources. And so if you have something, you had to have taken it from somebody else. And so if I took it from somebody else, I can have it because of I applied the coercive force, but my kids didn't apply the coercive force themselves. And so they have an unfair advantage. They're given an unfair advantage in a world of limited resources that you fight for, and so an inheritance is automatically privilege, right? It's so that understanding, right, that I've received something that I didn't earn by my own application of coercive force is a privilege that I don't deserve because I didn't earn it. That understanding is why they come and they say, this is why we have inheritance taxes.
Because
And
nobody
when they're
really
really
deserves it.
radical, yeah, right, exactly. They don't deserve it. Well, when that and then conservative evangelicals tend to be conservative, and they fight back against that, and they say, no, these are my kids, this is my stuff, I want to hand it to my kids, I have that right because of the biological connection. um a, and but what that is, what you end up saying is the biological connection is more fundamental than the covenantal connection, right? But
Mm.
but more covenant, that biology is more fundamental than religion. The same way you become a citizen when you're born, but you have to choose your religion and add it on to you later. It's a way of acting in a different cosmology. There's a different cosmology. Um, I guess I would say paedobaptism offers a different, or assumes a different cosmology than socialism. Uh, and what I would be curious about is how a Baptist would say their cosmology. How is their cosmology different than socialism if we don't receive our inclusion of into the body of Christ as a gift, but we have to grow up and choose it. Um, how are we receiving, how is that different at a cosmological level, right?
I love what you did, where the structure of this has implications that are not just the kind of spiritual ones, but are also tangible. And that's one thing that I think the conversation has missed, is that inside of the new world, if Christ really is the legal heir in all ways, and we are living in a new world because of the new covenant is here, the implications of that and the inheritance that comes along with that really does matter, though.
Right. I think it really does.
Because it's if you start erasing one part of this, you got to erase the other too.
I think it turns out that it's all connected. I would love to have the conversation with the Baptist, because I just don't know what they would say. I don't have enough experience to be able to say, here's what I think they would say, or or if they would just say, well, I think the Enlightenment was a good thing because it actually separated us from this inheritance understanding, right? Where you used to have this understanding of a deep of a generational covenant connection, but individualism is the right way to go, right? I don't know if that's what a Baptist would say. I mean, I know that's what a Baptist I know that's what the understanding of religion is, right? Is that religion is something that you have to choose. It's not something. And I know that Reformed Baptists say, well, no, you are chosen by God still. So that I'm not denying that. It's just that you wait around for something to happen from the child. You wait around for them to be rational enough to be able to express it, or whatever it is. You're waiting, right? It's not something that you say they receive this as part of their inheritance, right? It's their inclusion into God's people isn't a part of their inheritance. So I just don't know what a Baptist says. So I would love to hear that. Maybe this is what the next round of the of the was it the Reformed March Madness?
Is that what it is? Oh, yeah, from Dead Man
Well,
Walking.
no, because it's Knox Unplugged versus
James White.
James White dividing line. So maybe we need to have this conversation with James White, and then
I don't like going up against James White. His folks are like cult followers. They always they come out for him, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My only strategy in this was to try and beat James, was to try and get all the Muslims who he's debated and who hate him to try and vote for us. That was my strategy. Is like, if you hate James White and you debated him, maybe all the Catholics too. If you hate James White, vote.
That's the way that's the way the Democrats are trying to get votes for Joe Biden.
Yeah, if you hate,
because nobody's arguing for Joe Biden, they're always arguing
that's
against Trump.
But you know,
so James White is the Trump of the. That's what we're saying, right?
So I think though Presbyterians do this too, because I find that while they will acknowledge a lot of the same things that we'll agree with, they won't operate in that way though. They won't practice. I don't think there's a very few Christians that are really approaching the world in a covenantal structure. And here's something that I am finding out more and more, Jason. The more and more I get this, covenantalism really is, in order to be global, you have to be local. Does that make sense? In order, and this is what I don't think is being understood about some of my Christian nationalist brothers. I think some of them get it, but they don't get it. And some of them would like the idea because it's having an impact socially. But the most important thing that I do on a global level to advance the kingdom are the things that I do on a local level with my family and my wife and my kids and my church and my community. Like, that is everything, right? And I find the impact of that, because I'm covenantal. I have a set of arrows that are living in a certain type of culture, believe in a certain type of thing, walk in a certain type of way, understanding the world, that advance beyond where I am. And the blessings of God being in my home, that garden advances and spreads out and start touching other covenantal people's gardens, and that garden spreads out, starts touching more. And it creates this domino effect. And I don't think that people understand just how essential the home is and individual faithfulness is to the impact of this new covenant reality.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because it's something that is done by faith. It's something that is not done. And not by works. The only thing you can do is deal with what you've got in front of you well. Right.
I don't think people, when you say by faith, I always want to break that down, because that's such a term that everybody uses, but I don't think everybody really knows what that means. Right. When you say by faith, everybody's got an idea, but they don't really, that isn't a tangible concept to most evangelicals. Oh, by faith. So I just believe it really hard in my heart.
Right. Okay. Yes. I think I know what you're saying. So sometimes it is helpful to have a nihilistic definition. So here you go. So I'm going to tell you what faith isn't first, because not all nihilistic definitions are automatically unhelpful, as long as it's not a metaphysical nihilism. When God promises something and you refuse to believe it and live and thereby live according to it, that's called faithlessness, right? You don't have faith when God promises something and you won't believe it. When God promises something, when God doesn't promise something and you do believe it, that is called presumption, right? So the theological category is presumption. You presume that on God is going to do this thing, give me this thing, whatever it is, but he hasn't promised it. That's called presumption. So faith is when God has promised something and then you believe it, right? And a living faith, then you live according to the faith, the belief, right? So because and so you've got a faith, for example, or a promise, for example, that God he promises to reward those that trust him, right? Reward those that follow him. That's a promise that God gives. My dog climbed into my lap.
I thought you were just going to straight go for the Abrahamic promises: seed, land, and
yeah. Well, but specifically, that when it says the devil or the devils believe that God is. They don't believe that he's a rewarder of those who serve
who diligently seek him. Yeah.
who diligently seek him, right? So where we believe that, and so when we diligently seek him, then we know that he rewards, that he's a rewarder, right? So he's in an Anglo-Saxon king that that rewards people is called a ring-giving king, right? He's a ring giver. And so when you say, well, what kind of ruler is he? Well, he's a ring giver, right? He's a ring-giving king. That would be the old Anglo-Saxon way of putting it. And the reason I use that is because I think it's a helpful. They had categories that we don't really have. So when you're a good citizen, because what do you get by being a good citizen in America? Well, you get to pay your fair share, right? You get to pay more taxes, right? So we are in a situation because of the socialism, because of the metaphysic, that we're more like in a Gideon situation where you have to hide your threshing. And so we don't have experience of this kind of ruler, right? So, but throughout history, there were great rulers that, and we knew they were great because when you served them, you were rewarded for it, right? You were better off. The reality is that kind of king is the ruler of all things. And so when you do good, you will be rewarded, right? So faith looks at that promise and says, well, even when it looks otherwise, I'm going to continue to serve him. So this is Paul, saying when they try to let him off with a warning, and he says, no, don't you need to obey the law, right? If I want this city to be blessed, it needs to obey its laws, and that law means I should get arrested and I need to be sent to Rome, right? Paul insists that the law is kept, even though it's going to harm him, quote unquote harm him, because he also knows he's been told he's going to go to Rome, and now he sees this, that he sees right, free trip, right? But he's in this odd situation where his faith gets him into trouble, but he knows that the true authority, Jesus is the true authority, and he rewards those who diligently seek him. And so he's out there insisting that he's going to do what's right no matter what. He's going to diligently seek the Lord, trusting that his reward is being, he says, reserved for him. He's built up as being held. So faith means you see a promise like that, and when you see a shortcut that involves sinning, that you refuse to take it, right? So my dad was an electrical contractor, and he was regularly called by general contractor. He used to tell me, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up except a general contractor, because he did not like general contractors. He would say, he would get phone calls from general contractors saying like, hey, I know this is the bid you put in, but under the table, I just want to let you know that if you do this, you might win the bid. And he would say, don't do under the table. And he'd hang up on people all the time, consistently throughout his, and it was because he knew that God was a rewarder of those that diligently sought him, right? So he, and at one point he was gonna, his business was going under. He had the paperwork filled out to declare bankruptcy, and he got a phone call with the paperwork sitting on his desk that had he been willing to compromise, it would have gotten him out of bankruptcy, right? The money was offered to him for under the table with a compromise, and he said, "Don't do under the table," and he hung up on him, and he said, I don't compromise on that. I do," and God ended up saving his business while he was on his way to file the paperwork after he had turned down the under the table offer. But he because of that, when he died, my mom was well taken care of, right? And that was his goal in life, right? With that, and so God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. It's that means that even when doing the right thing is going to hurt you, right? We keep our vows to the Lord, even to our own hurt, right? Because we trust he's the rewarder, and that it's much worse to go through struggles in the moment and not without God on your side than to go through difficulties knowing that God is on your side because you've trusted him and you diligently sought him.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think that's what I mean by living by faith is that that you don't live by sight, you don't live by works, and at the end of the day, you turn around and you say thank you for it all, because I think gratefulness is the central expression of faith. That's what Romans 1 says.
I couldn't agree more. So here's something I think that you failed to answer my question. So, and if I ask my question, we spend another hour and a half going through it because I know that you would answer it. I know you got. I interrupted you actually when it came to talking about faith. And I think that's important because I don't think we have a real good concept of it. But here's what I want to do. I think we should hit on and I think your book is doing this indirectly, what it means to live in the new covenant and under covenant, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what your book is doing, and you're doing it through Phantasaical Land. And I think C.S. Lewis was trying to get people to understand this too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He said that he called it the deep magic of reality. Right. He said because people don't have categories, so he said
that's next week's show. The deep magic of reality is next week's show. That's what we're doing next week. And that basically is what it means to live into the covenant, right? Like that's
yep.
And maybe we should call this one the deep magic of reality part 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
And then next week we'll call that. And then I think you could talk about your book, but I think we have to spend enough time talking about, and this is something we've been really having a conversation on since we started Knox Unplugged, the deep magic of reality. And so there is a part where, was it the Puddle Glum?
Yeah.
Where it's like everybody has lost their mind and everybody's out of phase and nobody understands reality. And we're all in this kind of like weird trap. And it's like, we need to smell something burning.
Some burnt marsh wiggle.
Burnt marsh wiggle, right? And I think covenant reality is that burnt marsh wiggle.
Dude, I think that was what accidentally happened with the comment about Baptist sacramental theology leading to transgenderism. I think that was an accidental burnt marsh wiggle.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I just sent you that clip where there's people are still talking about it,
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, it just keeps coming up. But I think it's because the conversation that we haven't been having is about what kind of place is this? The cosmology, the metaphysics, and so our sacramental theology is all nihilistic in its definitions. And so,
well, we don't even know. Sacramental. It's funny when you said infant baptism is justification by faith in sacramental form, and the people's heads were like, "What? How? What are you talking about? I don't even understand." And it was like, "Wait, we don't believe that?"
Right. Because I thought even Baptists agreed on that baptism is the sacrament, is a picture of justification, right? I don't think that's not something I thought we disagreed on, but what I realized is the disagreement was baptism is a picture. That is the part. That's the part that we disagreed on.
So we don't understand sacraments.
Don't understand sacraments. I don't think. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think we live in a world where we believe that
Where they
there
make sense.
is. Yeah, that.
Well, they don't
that
touch down. They don't touch down.
sacraments can mean.
They're up here. They don't touch down.
Yeah.
They don't touch down, which is why. And the reason I know they don't touch down, Jason, is because most churches had no problem with taking what the government told them to do about their sacraments on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So I know if people thought that the sacraments are what they were and what their sacramental theology came out to play in full effect when the government said, hey, you can't have communion on Sunday. You can't sing on Sunday. You can't go to church on Sunday. And everybody was like, you right. And then I was like, okay, all right. Well, I guess it's true. We don't understand what in the world. They just became God.
Right.
Literally,
But
they took the what's it, Melchizedek throne and said it's ours, and we get to tell you how to function.
One of my favorite and funniest memories from COVID was, we had the first Sunday where we gathered, and they had our deacons they had read really carefully and tried to figure out what things can we do. We're trying to be respectful. What can we do? And they had tried to put up a shield between the Lord's Supper and the people, like a clear shield. And the pastor got up there and he went to start it, and he was like, what are we doing? And he steps around in front of it. He brings all the stuff around, and he was like, and it was just that moment of, he looks up and he realizes, what are we doing? Like, and because the impulse is right. We're trying to figure out, like, we're trying to be respectful of authority God established in the world. But we're not going to not do the Lord's Supper, right? Like, that's not an option.
Yeah,
they can't tell us that.
We put up a veil.
This
was see-through though. This was see-through.
You put up a see-through, and he just looks around and he says, "What are we doing?" And he picks up everything and he moves it around to in front of it. And he was like, "Okay, now we're gonna do the Lord's Supper." And I was, come on, and it was just that the impulse is, we know what this thing is. We know what God has given us this for. That thing that they told us, which just when it was a written description, you didn't think much about it. But as soon as you saw it in person, you're like, oh, that's it getting in the way of the Lord's, what this thing means. And then they just took it all down. And, next week it was back to normal. But it was just like where what is, faith says, well, we can't not do it because Jesus told us to. And then
that's right.
You're just making adjustments along the way of when you run into something and you go, wait a second, oops, we messed that one up. Never mind. Let's try that again.
And I think because we don't understand covenant and sacraments and what they mean, then it was easy for the government to help us put in another form of sacrament.
Yeah.
That's what we did. We said, obviously, this isn't that important. And so we became faithless, and we put in another form of sacrament in the place of the one that God had given us.
Right.
And it was in the form of sanitizers, and we didn't even think anything about it. Right.
Well, and it was in so many ways, all of it was a bunch of Levitical type movements, right? But they were, secular for health reasons, all sorts of things. And the reality is the government does have, it can, there are things that it can do to mitigate disease. That's right. That's within their authority. What they don't have the authority to do is to tell us how to have church.
That's right.
Both within the American legal system as well as within the biblical legal system.
And I would say that their authority to mitigate disease is a very limited one, but extremely harsh as well, which they
Mhm.
didn't do, by the way.
No. They did the opposite of what they could have done.
That's they should have done, absolutely.
What they should have done, what they're allowed to do.
But
If assuming that it was that it was what they thought it was.
But you have
what they were
this
told
is
it was.
this is why it goes back to you have to understand covenant realities and the sacraments and understand where everybody else is supposed to fit in this thing. Here's
Yeah.
the Lord Jesus Christ. He's in charge of all things. Where's everybody else fit at underneath that authority? And we just like beep, 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 beep. We blinked. Anyway, all right. We next week is going to be the deep magic of reality, part 2.
Part 2. All right.
Yeah.
We
So you
fun.
got a lot of homework to do.